a drug dealer will kill 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people during the course of his or her life.
The clock struck 4 in the morning, and Minneapolis held its breath in the darkness. Most of the city slept soundly, unaware that beneath their quiet neighborhoods, a shadow empire had been growing for years. Federal agents moved through empty streets like ghosts, their vehicles cutting through the pre-dawn silence with deadly purpose. This wasn't just another drug bust. This was the moment America discovered that one of the most sophisticated narcotics operations in the northern United States had been hiding in plain sight, orchestrated by a woman the intelligence community knew only as the Somali Narco queen. At exactly 4:11 in the morning, 26 unmarked federal convoys positioned themselves across the Twin Cities metro area. FBI tactical teams, ICE enforcement units, and DEA strike forces had spent months preparing for this moment. The target wasn't some remote compound or abandoned warehouse. It was woven into the fabric of everyday Minnesota life, disguised as community centers, cultural organizations, and legitimate businesses that thousands of residents trusted without question. The first breach shattered the morning quiet like thunder. Steel doors buckled under the force of federal battering rams. Flashbang grenades illuminated residential hallways in stark, blinding white. Laser sights cut through the darkness of family homes and community gathering spaces. What agents discovered in those first chaotic minutes would redefine their understanding of organized crime in America. Inside what appeared to be an ordinary suburban residence, federal teams uncovered a hidden entrance beneath the kitchen floor. The steel hatch opened onto a staircase leading into a sophisticated underground facility that had no business existing in this quiet neighborhood. Industrial shelving lined the walls, stacked floor to ceiling with vacuum-sealed packages of pure fentanyl. Modified assault rifles hung from specialized racks, their serial numbers filed away and replaced with foreign markings. Smartphones arranged in precise rows, each device wiped clean but logged in detailed manifests that suggested a level of organization that stunned even veteran investigators. The bunker contained enough fentanyl to kill millions of Americans. Chemical precursors, still warm from recent production, sat in temperature-controlled containers, waiting to be processed into deadly street drugs. A wall-mounted map displayed the upper Midwest marked with intersecting red lines, revealing trafficking routes that federal agencies had never detected despite years of surveillance efforts. But the most chilling discovery came from a tablet left carelessly in sleep mode on a central workbench. One touch of the screen revealed the face that intelligence analysts had been hunting for over 6 years. A woman in traditional dress, smiling warmly at a Minneapolis charity event, surrounded by local officials and community leaders. The encrypted profile beneath her photograph bore a designation that made every agent in that underground chamber freeze. Sarah Q, the phantom they thought was hiding somewhere in East Africa, had been living right here in Minnesota all along. Amamira Sarah Ali had built her empire by becoming invisible in the most effective way possible. She didn't hide in shadows or operate from remote locations. She embedded herself so deeply into the legitimate community infrastructure that questioning her presence would have seemed like questioning Minnesota itself. She organized winter coat drives for immigrant families. She coordinated literacy programs for elderly refugees. She spoke at fundraising dinners where city council members and police chiefs applauded her dedication to cultural unity. Every public appearance, every charitable initiative, every community program served a dual purpose. The same transportation networks that delivered winter clothing to needy families also moved fentanyl precursors from hidden storage facilities. The cultural centers where children learned traditional dances doubled as coordination hubs for a trafficking operation that spanned multiple states. The legitimate businesses that provided jobs for recent immigrants also laundered millions in drug profits through carefully structured financial schemes. Her recruitment strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. She didn't target career criminals or desperate addicts. She identified members of her own community who struggled with legitimate employment, who faced language barriers, who needed income to support families back home. She offered them work that appeared completely legal, driving trucks for community organizations, managing inventory for cultural centers, handling accounting for charitable foundations. Most of her workers genuinely believed they were helping their community prosper in America. Hassan Ibrahim managed storage facilities that federal inspectors had visited multiple times without detecting anything suspicious. His warehouses contained exactly what the paperwork claimed: halal food supplies and cultural materials for community events. The hidden compartments built into the floor systems remained undetected because they were engineered with the same precision as the legitimate storage above them. Yahi Mahad operated a fleet of semi-trucks that transported goods across 8 states without ever raising suspicion from highway patrol or customs inspectors. His vehicles passed every inspection because they were designed to pass every inspection. The illegal cargo traveled in shielded compartments that defeated X-ray scanners and drug-sniffing dogs, while the visible cargo consisted of legitimate goods bound for legitimate destinations. The financial structure of her operation rivaled anything federal investigators had seen from traditional organized crime families. Asha Degmofar, working as a certified public accountant during business hours, managed a parallel financial system after dark. She constructed cryptocurrency networks that could survive federal seizures, created shell corporations that appeared legitimate under scrutiny, and established offshore accounts that remained invisible to domestic banking regulations. Her weapon supplier, Mukhtar Adonhili, never resembled the stereotypical arms dealer. He worked as a community volunteer, helping refugees navigate government paperwork and social services. His real expertise involved acquiring military-grade firearms and modifying them to avoid detection during routine inspections. The weapons he provided were never intended for street violence or territorial disputes. They were insurance against federal raids, stored strategically throughout the network for use only when the entire operation faced existential threat. The genius of Sarah Ali's system lay in its complete integration with legitimate community life. Every criminal element had a lawful counterpart. Every illegal transaction was mirrored by a legal one. Every participant had plausible reasons for their actions that would satisfy any investigator who didn't know exactly what to look for. She had created a parallel economy that lived inside the legitimate economy like a second circulatory system, pumping poison through arteries that appeared healthy from the outside. Federal teams conducting simultaneous raids across the metro area discovered the true scale of what they were facing. The operation extended far beyond Minnesota's borders, with distribution nodes in Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, and Michigan. Each location was disguised as a community service organization, a small business serving immigrant populations, or a cultural center promoting traditional arts and customs. The sophistication of the communication system stunned digital forensics experts. Encrypted messaging platforms that automatically deleted conversations, servers housed in community media centers that appeared to be editing equipment for cultural programming. Financial transactions routed through dozens of legitimate businesses before reaching their final destinations in East African banking networks. As dawn broke over Minneapolis, federal commanders realized they weren't dealing with a traditional criminal organization. This was something entirely new, a hybrid entity that functioned simultaneously as a humanitarian aid network and a narcotics trafficking empire. The woman at its center had weaponized trust, community solidarity, and cultural identity to build something that federal agencies were still struggling to categorize. The raids continued throughout the morning, but one critical element remained missing. Despite seizing enough evidence to dismantle her entire operation, agents had not found Amamira Sarah Ali herself. Security cameras showed her leaving her residence hours before the first federal vehicles arrived in the area. She had vanished into the same community that had unknowingly sheltered her criminal enterprise for years. Somewhere in the expanding web of Minneapolis's immigrant neighborhoods, the Somali narco queen was watching her empire burn. But federal investigators were beginning to understand that her greatest achievement wasn't building a trafficking network that could survive detection. It was building a trafficking network that could survive her own capture. The silence that followed her disappearance felt heavier than the raids themselves. Federal command centers across Minneapolis buzzed with activity as analysts tried to comprehend what they had uncovered. This wasn't simply a drug operation that happened to use community organizations as cover. This was something far more sophisticated, a complete reimagining of how criminal enterprises could embed themselves within American society. Intelligence officers studying the seized materials began to understand the true architecture of her system. Every legitimate program she had touched became a component in a larger machine. The youth mentorship initiatives that connected teenage refugees with adult role models also served as recruitment pipelines for the trafficking network. The elderly assistance programs that helped immigrants navigate healthcare and social services doubled as intelligence gathering operations, mapping which families needed money and which individuals could be trusted with sensitive tasks. Her financial engineering surpassed anything federal investigators had encountered in decades of combating organized crime. Traditional cartels moved money through obvious channels, banks in known havens, businesses that existed solely to launder profits. Sarah Ali had constructed something entirely different. Her money moved through legitimate charitable donations, through community development grants, through small business loans that appeared completely normal to bank compliance officers. The cryptocurrency networks she employed weren't the crude digital wallets that street-level dealers typically used. These were sophisticated, multi-layered systems that converted drug profits into digital assets, moved them through dozens of international exchanges, then reconverted them into legitimate investments in American real estate and business ventures. Federal financial crimes units discovered that she owned property across the upper Midwest through shell corporations so perfectly structured that they had never triggered a single suspicious activity report. Her weapon acquisition methods revealed the same level of strategic thinking. Instead of purchasing firearms through obvious illegal channels, she had exploited loopholes in private sale regulations, straw purchase schemes involving individuals with clean backgrounds, and import pathways that disguised military-grade equipment as cultural artifacts or mechanical components. The modified rifles found in her facilities weren't street weapons. They were precision instruments intended for use against federal tactical teams, stored strategically throughout her network to ensure her key personnel could mount effective resistance if cornered. The communication systems that held her empire together operated on principles that cybersecurity experts were still trying to decode. Rather than relying on a single encrypted platform that could be compromised, she had created multiple parallel networks that intersected only when necessary. Community volunteers coordinating food drives used one system. Financial operators managing money transfers used another. Logistics coordinators moving product used a third. None of these groups could compromise the others, even if they were fully penetrated by law enforcement. But the most disturbing aspect of her operation was how effectively she had exploited the genuine needs of her community. The immigrants she recruited weren't motivated by greed or criminal ambition. They were motivated by survival, by the desire to support families, by the hope of building better lives in America. She had identified their vulnerabilities and turned those vulnerabilities into operational assets without most of them ever realizing they were participating in criminal activity. Federal prosecutors reviewing the evidence faced unprecedented challenges in determining how to charge hundreds of individuals who genuinely believed they were engaged in humanitarian work. Truck drivers who had transported fentanyl across state lines insisted they thought they were delivering medical supplies to underserved communities. Warehouse workers who had handled millions in drug profits believed they were processing donations for disaster relief efforts. Accountants who had laundered money through charity organizations maintained they were simply helping immigrant-owned businesses navigate complex American tax regulations. The raids had netted substantial seizures, but federal commanders understood they were dealing with a hydra. Every facility they shut down had backup locations already prepared. Every financial account they froze had parallel accounts ready to activate. Every communication channel they disrupted had alternative channels waiting in reserve. She had built redundancy into every aspect of her operation, ensuring that no single enforcement action could cripple the entire network. As intelligence analysts mapped the full scope of her empire, they discovered connections that stretched far beyond the American Midwest. Financial transfers linked her operation to similar networks in East Africa, the Middle East, and Western Europe. The fentanyl precursors found in her facilities had originated in chemical plants across Asia, before being routed through multiple countries and disguised as legitimate industrial supplies. The weapons recovered from her storage sites included components manufactured in different continents, assembled by her technicians into configurations that federal ballistics experts had never encountered. Her influence within legitimate institutions was more extensive than anyone had initially realized. Community leaders who had worked closely with her for years struggled to reconcile the woman they knew with the criminal mastermind federal authorities described. City council members who had praised her humanitarian efforts found themselves questioned about their knowledge of her activities. Police officials who had participated in cultural outreach programs she organized faced internal investigations to determine whether they had been unknowingly compromised. The psychological profile that emerged from seized documents and intercepted communications painted a picture of someone who understood power dynamics with surgical precision. She had studied American law enforcement methods, federal investigative techniques, and community policing strategies with the dedication of a doctoral student. She knew exactly how federal agencies would respond to different types of criminal activity, and she had designed her operation to exploit the blind spots in their standard procedures. The arrest of Amamira Sarah Ali marked the end of one chapter, but it was only the beginning of a larger reckoning. Her empire had proven that the greatest threats to American communities don't always announce themselves with violence or chaos. Sometimes they arrive wearing the mask of compassion, speaking the language of unity, and building power through the very institutions designed to protect us. The question that haunts federal investigators today isn't whether other networks like hers exist, but how many are still operating undetected in communities across America.